Well, first, I'd like to thank you once again for agreeing to let us interview you for your 50-year achievement status. That's absolutely incredible, and thank you very much for letting us do this again.
Well, you're most welcome.
All right, so my first question, you've worked now as an archivist in this university for almost 50 years. What's so great about it?
No,
exactly?
wait a minute. I haven't been archivist for 50 years.
Oh.
I started as a reference librarian,
Mm-hmm.
but I really was double dipping, if you can use that term. I had half a day doing reference and half a day doing cataloging. When I arrived, Father Fidelis, who was the library director then, he asked me if I had any preferences or did I care what I did. I said, I don't care what I did, as long as I got to work with the people. So I think if I hadn't said that, maybe I would be only cataloging all day long. But when I got the combination of reference and cataloging, that's a perfect combination, because that way you get to talk with the people who are using the library, and when you're cataloging, that helps you figure out what's the best way to enter that, to put that book or whatever it is in the catalog. So that was the first thing I was doing. Then I've had, I don't remember how many different positions I've had. From after that, okay, I changed the title and became Director of Reader Services. That meant all the circulation people and all the reference people. I was in charge of all that, and that included a whole lot of student assistants. We had student assistants who were working 4 hours a week. It wasn't the kind of student assistants we have now. The 4 hours a week were, at that time, they were considered service hours, and every student was required to do 4 hours of student service a week. And they could work in wherever somebody wanted a student worker. So we had students working in circulation and in reference, and I got to work with them. And then, of course, being in charge of the reference, I got to work with all the students who were looking for stuff for their papers, or just looking for something good to read, or where to find this, or whatever it was that they needed help with. Then after that, I became library director, and that lasted, that was in 1975, I believe, or 74. I think it was 1975. That's when I became library director. And that lasted until 1988. When I got that far, this building was a major project that I was responsible for. Really not the whole building, because the original building was here, but the original building was built for a student body of 300 or 400. And even by the time we got to the 70s, there were a lot more students than 300 or 400. And it kept growing and kept growing, and so it got smaller and too small. And by the time we got into the 70s or near the 70s, Father Fidelis was already writing a letter to the president and saying we have to have more library space. Well, it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. But finally, in 19. Okay, I don't remember which accreditation. Okay, the 1980 accreditation visit. In the library staff really wrote most of the report for the library report, and we stressed in that report that we needed more space for the library, because by that time we had books over in Lewis Hall. We had books in the basement of St. Francis. We had books in St. Leo Hall, and we had even more books just in storage. Nobody could get to them. That's how cramped we were. We simply didn't have room. So we put that into the report for this accreditation visit. And the accreditation, the people on the committee for the library review, they agreed with us. And they made a recommendation that it was then college, that the college had to increase the library space. In other words, make the library bigger. And a recommendation meant that if the college didn't do it, then it would lose its accreditation. Well, things began to happen fast, at least at start. There was a committee, for the contacts or whatever, and as we got further into it, then I became the chairperson for the library committee for how we were going to plan it, what we were going to do, what it needed, and so on. So that was a very interesting part of the 50 years, helping to plan the expansion and working directly with the architects. And so what you see now is from where the elevator is, this far over, that was all new space on all 3 levels. We didn't have an elevator at that time, so the elevator was put in, and down on the first floor where there's that skylight, that was added. That was the connector from the old part of the building to the new part of the building. So that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work too. Yeah, it was a lot of work, and someplace along the line, we were ready to go, but the board didn't approve going ahead. They didn't get money enough to do it, and I was really furious because I thought, well, where's their plan B? Because they didn't have a choice, if they didn't do it, we would lose the accreditation. Well, the person who saved the day was the wife of Daniel A. Cannon. He had died, and she wanted to give enough money for the library in honor of him. So that's why it's Daniel A. Cannon Library. Daniel A. Cannon Memorial Library. Okay, so so that happened. So that finally happened, and then in 1988, I took another sabbatical, and then Kay Kasuda became library director, and I, on my sabbatical, that's when I started working on my doctorate, and because I wanted to I wanted my doctorate to be a history, whatever. It took longer. So when I got my basic courses done, then I was back here and I was doing reference work, and that continued until the late 90s, and by that time Kay was wanting to retire, and so then I became library director again. Okay, and that continued. All right, now I think I've given all of my job titles. Yeah, I think I did. All right, okay, the time that after I was library director, when I came back and I was working on my dissertation, all that kind of stuff, I was reference librarian again. And coupled with instruction service, library instruction services. Okay, so then when Kay retired, then I became library director again, and that lasted until 2006, I think it was. And then I became university archivist and special collections librarian, although I started doing the archivist stuff in the 90s, someplace in there. But I was also a reference librarian / archivist. Okay?
So you've worked with the library for 50 years then?
You better believe. Yes, because I'm university archivist and special collections librarian. And I don't know, well, you'll probably see as you look around or see or figure out what's going on, what part is special collections and what part is archives. Now, before you came up, I was working on some information that somebody who was visiting the campus she wanted to find out something about. She said her uncle, I believe, from the dates that she gave me, it's probably her great uncle who was a priest here. So that's getting into archives and I'm going to have to do some more digging to find out more information about him. So special collections, right now we're working on a project. Ken Kelly, who's my graduate assistant, he's working on a project that we will have going starting in the new term. We want to do a display of books written by faculty authors, which we have a number in the special collections, but Dr. Durst's office has always had a display of faculty books, and I thought, well, we need to check that too, because they may have some that we don't have. Okay, so Ken's working on that, and yes, that's correct. She had some over there that we don't have over here, so that will start happening sometime in the fall when the new academic year starts, and we're going to have quite a list of faculty authors. That was kind of fun trying to figure out, okay, who did what, and we may not get them all, but we might inspire anybody who hasn't given a book to the special collections to do so we can show it off. Well, no, it's spreading the word. You want to appreciate the faculty and what they're doing.
What would you say is the best part of your 50-year journey here?
Ooh. Working with the people in all kinds of ways. As library director, it's a different kind of way that you do. And then it wasn't just the students, it was all the staff. The reference was ideal for that, although you don't have to be a reference librarian in order to work with the people, but it's easier because you have direct contact with them. They don't have to hunt you down. If you're working reference, you're right there at the reference desk. I don't think I would say I have a favorite part, except, well, I enjoyed being a library director too. It was challenging, and the addition to the library building was a big achievement, and we finally got it, and you can see what we have. And it really needs to be expanded again. When we finished the plans for it, it was built so the expansion was done so that if we needed to have more space, we could just go right out to the north and add a space that we needed. Like we did some figuring about how long the expansion that we were adding would be good for, and we figured by about the year 2000 we would need to expand again, and that was true. We don't have again the kind of room that we should have. One big thing that is missing, in my opinion, is all the rooms that we had done for group study rooms. They've been taken over for offices, which leaves the students without group study rooms. Well, you can get by without that, but if you have a group that wants to study together, that's what those group studies rooms were, designed for, and it would give them privacy, and they could be talking without a librarian saying shh. And okay, well, you can look on the shelves and you can see, well, there are some places, well, I don't know where you're going to put a book. Some people seem to think that, okay, you have everything on computers now, you don't need books anymore. I don't believe that. Anyway, that was a big achievement, and it was a lot of fun doing it. And I learned a lot doing that too. Okay, and during those years, I was also with different library associations, with Catholic Library Association. I served a term as president of the Catholic Library Association, which is a national organization. I also served a term with the Tampa Bay Library Consortium as president there. That was in the very early years when it was being founded. Okay, and seems to me there was another, oh, yes. I served a term with the American Benedictine Academy, a two-year term there. American Benedictine Academy, when I got into that was in the late 60s. We then had a library section, but then we decided, no, we're not going to separate the people. Let all the people come together, and because it's just one academy. And the objective of the American Benedictine Academy is to continue to know what Benedictine life is all about, and Benedictine books and everything that goes Benedictine. I can tell you a whole lot more about that, but let's don't get sidetracked on that.
You mentioned that your journey here was challenging. Was there any particular point where you had a challenge that you would say was your best challenge?
Well, the addition to the library building was a big challenge, because that had to be figured out, exactly what did we need and how did it need to work. It needed to be figured out for, is this going to work, kind of thing. What I had in my head that with the expansion of the building, that I wanted floor-to-ceiling windows on the north side so we could see the lake. And I had gotten that idea from visiting a library up in Chicago that their library looked out over Lake Michigan. And I was up there, and it was very cold, and so I made a comment to the librarian. I said, well, probably these spaces are not used much in the cold weather. And she corrected me. She said, they're always very popular because you're overlooking the lake and it's very calming. Well, then that just really made me more determined to have floor-to-ceiling windows, not just up a counter height and then you have some windows over it. That's what we had to start with. We had bookshelves under the windows, and so the bottom part you couldn't see out at all. You could see out over the top, and that was good. But floor to ceiling, I guess you've seen light bulbs hanging from the ceiling on a single cord. Well, that's how it was lit. But they didn't have the lights on all the time. So he would go up and down the aisles, and he would turn the light on where he wanted to look, and I would follow him, and I was just fascinated with all that. Of course, then he also loved to read, not just German, but English. And when I started going to school, I learned to read, and that was really something that I wanted to do, and I've always wanted to do it. And I did. When I was in grade school, we had a library in the back of the classroom, but really all it was a shelf full of books. But I read them because I was too smart for the rest of the kids, and I didn't have enough to do. So when I had all my work done, I would go back and I would get some books to read, and my love of reading matched my father's and my mother's, because she loved to read too, but she didn't have the same kind of education he did. So then, following that line of thinking or remembering, when I was teaching in grade school, one year I became a school principal, and the school was a brand new school. And I thought, okay, this school is going to have a library, not just a shelf of books. Now, at that time, I was not a librarian, but I got some of the librarians in the public schools who had school libraries to help us set up a school library, and we did. Okay, that was that was early 60s. Okay, so then about that time, the sisters were beginning to be teachers in the college, and okay, I was asked a question, would I have any interest in libraries? And I said yes, maybe. Well, next thing I knew, I was sent to library school. Okay, that was up in Chicago, at what was then Rosary College. Okay, so I thought, well, I'm going to be, back in grade school, and I can, make this library that I had started even better. Well, no, that didn't happen. I got sent here. I didn't, choose to go here. I was just assigned to come here. Okay, so that now you know the rest of the story on that. So, I really did not mind being assigned to the library, and I really have. Well, I have loved reading all my life and working with books, and so I really got to do it. Although I can't say that I have kept up with all the reading that I would like to do, because guess what? You got to do the work too. Work takes time. Oh, well, now here's a cute one. One of my nieces, when she was real little, she asked me one day, she said, somebody told me that librarians have to, I was already working here, somebody told me that librarians have to read all the books. I laughed. I told her, well, that's not quite true, because that's impossible. I could have, but I was handling all the books that were going into the library. And that's really kind of painful, when you're looking at all these new books and you get into something that you really like and you'd like to read it. Yeah, you can't take time out and read it. You have to do that on your own time. Because, I still like to read a lot. Okay, what else?
Is there anything in particular that you've regretted or wished you could change over the 50 years?
Well, I regret that the further expansion for the library hasn't happened yet. Maybe with a new president it will. Another thing I regret was when the expansion was finished, I had designed into on the lower level good space for the archives. Okay, and for books that we would call closed stacks, meaning books that are not really used a whole lot, and they don't have to be, easily gotten to. There was a room that we could put all the books that people didn't use a lot in the closed stacks, and that would give more room, on the regular shelves. Okay, well, all that space with all those two functions got taken away. Now I have an archive space that was really designed just for special collections. We have crammed into it both special collections and archives, so archives is really hurting a lot. This morning, Dr. Parker was over, and she's been coming over every week to do her research on a project that she's doing on the history of St. Leo College, St. Leo University. Okay, in order to accommodate her, I have to keep a cart of books in my office, and so we can get to them without having to fish for them. And then she has, instead of a reading room, she just has to use the floor up here. That's just one example of. That's not the right way to do it. You need to have space in the archives proper, not where the archives materials are so much, but in a room next to it. Any archives I've worked in, that's the way it's set up. And you don't get to go through the shelves. You ask for what you want to look for, and they bring it out to you. And you're not allowed to take pens or a lot of things that very strict that the archives materials do not get messed up, because that could be pretty bad. Archives materials are usually not replaceable because usually they're just one, this is it, and there's not another copy. Occasionally there might be but the point is, don't want the archives materials wandering off, which can happen in the library, which as we have, and I certainly do support that, open stacks. You can go directly to the bookshelves and get the books off yourself, and then check them out. Now sometimes that doesn't happen, and we lose stuff, but it's not as critical as if it were one of a kind, and it was something that you couldn't easily replace. Now I'm not saying to take the books out and don't turn them back in. I'm simply saying, okay, there are some privileges that you get when you can have open stacks, and when you have to keep archives materials in closed area that is off limits to the user, except to be brought out to a reading room, which would be not open floor, but a reading room which would be set up so that you can do your research and get copies made if there's something you want copies on. So what I'm saying is, we need to get that taken care of, and maybe with a new president we will. I don't know. It's not. I know what I would do if I had to say so. Okay, what else?
What do you hope for the library in the future?
Enough space for all the stuff what I just went through that we're not able to do right now. And, space is the big thing, because all you have to do is to walk around the stacks, and you're going to see there are places where it's pretty tight. We have already, going for us. You can get e-books. You can get a lot of things on the internet and in the resources that we have, that we subscribe to. Which in a way it does take up space, because you have to have room for people to be able to use the computers and whatever else it takes in order to get to whatever you're looking for. If you take a book out, that's, you've got it, but then the next person can't have it until it comes back, unless you have more copies. When I first came, Father Fidelis was, I don't know where he got this idea, but he was trying to have, for books that the college would be using, he wanted 10 copies of each book, which is a little much. And after a while, he admitted it. And we didn't buy 10 copies of each book for a long time, because it just really wasn't necessary. Well, I'd have to do some thinking, what else I would like to have. Definitely space is a big consideration. Hours, I would say we have adequate hours, open till early in the morning till 2 o'clock in the next morning. That's a long time. When I first started here, the library was closed for supper time, like closing at 5 and maybe opening again at 7. We stopped that a long time ago. Of course, we didn't have as many students then either. I would like to see also hosting visiting groups of students, like grade school students. We used to do that, but I haven't seen it being done in a long time. Hosting a group of grade students or high school students. In other words, visiting the library, so that, the library becomes an important place on a college campus or a university campus. And I could think of other things.
Do you feel that the library is kind of overshadowed sometimes by other things going around on campus?
And she's got some that we don't have. Maybe we'll get them when she leaves. Okay?
I actually have one more question.
Okay, all right.
What are your plans for the future? Do you know how much longer you'll be staying here?
Well, I know that okay. All right, do you know about Marian Library? That's the library at the monastery. Okay, and I have charge of that. Okay, and you know the monastery moved within the last year. Okay, so I've been working with some help, different help, getting it all set up the right way and whatever. And because I've been so busy, getting it all rearranged, in other words, getting things where they belong, I have not been able to keep up with adding new books to the library, and that ordinarily would be a rather simple thing, but the university, the library here, changed the source that we use for how to catalog the books, and I haven't learned it yet. And of course, I am very behind in getting the books into the library, so I'm going to have at least another year after this year, maybe two, because not only do I need to catch up on the books that need to go into that library, I need to learn the system, which I'm told the other librarians tell me it's easy. Well, that's fine, but it still takes time. So, so I'm saying at least another year, maybe two. And of course, there's the other thing about, okay, I would like to leave the stuff in the archives in pretty good order, and right now it's not in pretty good order. I've already talked about the 125-year anniversary. I had a lot of extra stuff to look up and find, and then somebody was doing a dissertation, and part of the dissertation was on St. Leo. So guess what? I have been very busy responding to people's needs for information. So, okay, I hope I make my limit is 2 more years after this. I hope I make it, because I don't like to leave messes behind. Well, mostly I want the Marian Library to be really in good shape. Do you know why we have that? That was Father Fidelis' idea. Remember, he was the first library director, and he was a library director when I first came in that place. So I was cataloging over here, and I was trying to get started cataloging over at the monastery, because when I came back from library school, well, I got the job. And he thought that the books that I was cataloging to put into the library at the monastery, that they should be in the catalog here, along with the others. Okay, so we worked that out, and every time I put a book in the library at the monastery, remember this was a card catalog, there were cards put into the catalog here, and of course I had cards for the catalog over there, and it was set up so that if a student or whoever was using the library here saw a book and they wanted to use it, they asked for it at the circulation desk, and okay, presto, Sister Dorothy brings it over here and they can check it out. Okay, so that's been going on ever since we started it way back. Only in the meantime, we started calling that Priory Library, because that's what the monastery was called back in those years. Well, even before that, when the sisters first came to Florida here, it was Holy Name Convent. Then in the early 1960s, it became Holy Name Priory. Okay, and then by the time we got to about 2000, we changed the name again, and it became Holy Name Monastery. So when it changed from priory to monastery, okay, I said we can't call it Priory Library anymore, and I don't want to call it Monastery Library. So I suggested and convinced the sisters that Marian would be a good name for it. For reasons of when the Benedictine sisters first came to the United States, they settled in Pennsylvania in a town called Marienstadt. That's Mary's town. Okay, so that's where the Marian comes from. And a lot of people think I'm misspelling it. No, I'm not. I'm spelling it M-A-R-I-E-N because that's the way the German name would be in Germany. Like the town up there is Marienstadt, Mary's city. And okay, so some people think I'm misspelling it, and no, I'm not. This is the way it is, and you respect it, and they do. So this new system that we're doing for cataloging here, I'm told it's easier than the old system, but I haven't used it yet because I haven't had time. But that's soon going to come to, well, I'm soon going to be caught up enough over at the monastery, the Marian Library, too, so that we can be, well, have to be, because another detail with changing where we get our information for the cataloging, the books in the the books that both here and in the monastery, they didn't all transfer to the new system. Guess what that means? Got to look them all up, and if they're not in, so that's going to take a lot of time, and it will take a lot more time. But now, as soon as I get really started on that, I have some volunteer librarians. One librarian especially, she had been a librarian in one of the Catholic high schools in Tampa, so she comes up once a week and she's been helping, and and there are a couple of others, but I first have to get the system going. And I'm almost there, but not quite. This is after school work.
I'm sure you'll get there.
I'm sure I will. Yeah. So that's a big part of my reason for it. No, I'll need well, I wouldn't have to. No, yeah. Well, in my thinking, it would be stupid for me to retire from here now, because if I'm not here, then I'm not getting the advantage of keeping up with what's going on here. And remember, the library that we have over at the monastery it's built on the way we do things here, and especially with the system that we're using for where the books go and how do you go with them, that kind of stuff. Okay, we'll get there. And the books will be properly noted in the, well, have you used the new cataloging enough to know what I'm talking about?